Hello and welcome to ConstructorCast, your AGC place for all the news, views, and interviews relevant to your construction business. I'm your host, Leah Pilconis. With me today is my colleague, Jimmy Christensen, who's Vice President of Government Relations for AGC of America. And Jimmy's going to give us a special report on the federal government's proposed $1.5 trillion infrastructure investment bill. Welcome back to ConstructorCast, Jimmy.
Thank you for having me, Leah.
Thanks for being here with us.
Of course.
To set the stage here, Jimmy, I want to just kind of lay out what we know right now. We know that our country is in desperate need of significant infrastructure investments to our roads and bridges, public transport, airports, schools, hospitals, and more. And we also know that states and local governments desperately need money. And the third thing we know that we're going to talk about here this morning is that this kind of investment could help bring the economy back to life. Let's walk through this. Jimmy, my first question for you. Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives have put to paper a $1.5 trillion infrastructure spending package. Can you explain to us what exactly would this accomplish? Kind of tell us what's in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big number. We've heard these numbers thrown out there before, but we haven't necessarily seen where the dollars all added up to the final 1.5 trillion or 2 trillion or whatever trillion that was thrown out there. Today, I can tell you that we have legislative language for the first time in well over 4 years of talking about a grand infrastructure bill that actually provides this funding. You have nearly $500 billion for surface transportation, roads, bridges, construction, as well as $22 billion for airports, runways, terminals. As you've got schools, K through 12. $130 billion, public and affordable housing of $100 billion for funding programs through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Obviously, healthcare in these times necessary for building new hospitals and clinics, $30 billion there. Clean energy, $70 billion for things like solar and wind farms, which we know many AGC members build as well. Water resources infrastructure, locks, dams, levees, $10 billion. Clean drinking water and wastewater, we've got over nearly $70 billion there. Broadband, which we're talking over probably right now, $80 billion for that. And then a whole host of other things sprinkled about. All in the form of either direct federal funding, tax incentives, or bonding programs. So there is a lot to this bill, but like I said, for the first time ever, we're actually seeing, as you said, pen to paper and a vote impending in the House before July 4th.
Very broad and covering infrastructure in its broadest sense, which, yes, awesome to see. And I imagine this is quite long. How many pages? How long did it take you to read through it?
So it's 2,309 pages long. It took a team of about 6 people a few days to read through. We've put together a brief analysis that doesn't cover everything, but the money is, and the investment at this time is what we consider and know is at the top of many AGC members' minds, as it is ours, of course. There are provisions in here that we don't necessarily like on the policy side, where it might make it more difficult to get some sort of materials that are sourced not domestically. You have issues perhaps with various labor requirements or apprenticeship requirements, possibly getting thrown in on the House floor as an amendment. There are certain things that we're sure will come up as traditional policy fights that we don't like that could get attached to this if it doesn't already exist in there. But the reality is this is the first step in the legislative process. And when you're starting with a $1.5 trillion offer, When you have a more conservative Senate body, that you can kind of tweak some of those less business friendly provisions, but also you might then lose some funding. But when you're talking about 1.5 trillion, you set the ceiling pretty high. You set the first number pretty high. So it's part of the negotiation process.
Right, and AGC is definitely applauding this first step.
Absolutely. We're happy to see that we have this. We're happy to know that it's very likely to pass the House, and we know that the Senate is very likely to consider their next COVID relief package a week or two after the July 4th recess. There's one thing that both parties want before they go to their national campaigns to nominate their presidential nominee, and that's a victory. So we hope that they can get one in a huge infrastructure package that keeps America working.
Your incredible team weeded through this 2,000 plus page proposed package. And I know you put together kind of a cheat sheet, an at a glance sheet. We're going to link to that in the show notes so folks can click and read a summary. Has there been any agreement on the best way to fund this sort of infrastructure package?
Well, that's always been the issue. It's great when we talk about this number. How do you pay for it? Well, in these times, I'll tell you how you pay for everything. You put it on the credit card. There's really been nothing that's been paid for through any sort of tax increase, or fee creation, and that's not the case here either. We are a few months away, as I mentioned, from a election. Politicians are usually, even in a non-election year, not necessarily excited about raising taxes or fees on their electorate, and we don't see that happening here. The thing for AGC members at this time, when they're looking down at the end of a barrel of their project backlogs, either in a few months here in 2020 or sometime early in 2021, I think they'll sleep better at night knowing that there's funding for the work they do coming down the pipeline. At this point, they don't care. And I don't think they'll necessarily care as long as they can keep their doors open and their people employed.
Jimmy, we've seen so many reports in the news that cities are just strapped for cash. And I think that everyone would agree that a bipartisan deal is really needed, probably now more than ever, just to keep infrastructure spending going at the state and municipal level. Can you talk to me more about this and what's going on at the state and local level?
Sure, I'll scare you with some real statistics here. We have groups like the Association for State Budget Directors saying that during the Great Recession, most states averaged cuts in their revenues somewhere along the lines of 11.6%. Well, now they're projecting many states will face income flows dropping by as much as or more as than 20%. So probably double the amount of the Great Recession, and we know what happened to construction then. So knowing that that's possible is another reason why we want to have a backstop and a backfill for things like construction projects, because the first thing that comes on the chopping block of any public owner is the construction project that you haven't built, because you've got a situation right now that's been comparable to the Great Depression. You have hundreds of thousands and millions of people filing for unemployment, so you're not going to cut. Many states are reluctant to cut anything when it comes to social safety net programs, and you've got a pandemic, so you don't want to cut anything related to public health. And you also have issues with protests and civil unrest, so you don't want to cut any other first responders necessarily. So, we've got a lot of situations here and a lot of funding needs. So having money that's dedicated for construction projects would be really nice to allow a lot of our members to sleep at night. And you got to also keep in mind that when hotels shut down, restaurants shut down, retailers shut down for months. A lot of them have not reopened, and those are also a lot of important private construction markets. So you have a lot of builders that need somewhere to go to build in the future too. And if those markets aren't there, they need a market to retreat to. And when you're talking about things like schools, hospitals, this is and affordable housing. These are projects that these contractors can do and will need to do in the absence of a robust private construction market.
Right, right. Absolutely. Well, and to bring this even closer to home to our construction member firms, AGC has been releasing its own data on project delays and project shutdowns. Can you share with our listeners what AGC and what you have been hearing from members firsthand? And are they really counting on this sort of federal help to increase demand for construction and to help them keep their workers employed and to keep things going?
I think the answer is certainty in a sea of uncertainty is more than welcome, and to be able to provide some degree of certainty through a provision like this to our industry would be a huge victory. And help a lot of people, both that run construction business and work for construction businesses, sleep better at night. You know, from our own data, and surveys, we have found that 2/3 of construction companies have had at least one construction project canceled since this pandemic started in March. The number of contractors who had work scheduled to begin in June, that number every week or two when we took those surveys kept on going up and up and up and up. And we suspect that with more spikes in the coronavirus influencing what states are doing when it comes to their opening up their economies or not, might only set back further construction projects that are slated to begin later in the year.
I mean, state and local governments need this. The public, we want better infrastructure. Our member firms were advocating for this. We know President Trump wants this. Where is there likely to be the most pushback?
So the most pushback at this point is going to come from the United States Senate. We have seen that it's been a wait and see. Obviously, we've spent $3 trillion or so, $2.5 to $3 trillion through 4 different packages so far since March. They've been taking a more cautious approach, which you understand when you're throwing around big numbers like that and the added addition to our national debt. However, the fiscal conservatives are concerned as to what additional spending could do to the national debt, to other resources, and as well as other programs that the federal government needs to fund and operate. As we've seen, the president's poll numbers kind of sag, his challengers' numbers rise. I think you'll find more Senate Republicans coming to the interest of supporting a package for infrastructure. The difference between what we saw in the previous packages, I would say, is relief in the form of keeping businesses simply afloat without necessarily providing long-term benefits to the country. When you have things like, obviously unemployment is good, but it's the difference between feeding a man for a day and teaching a man how to feed himself. It's one of those things where infrastructure investment isn't just keeping people and growing the economy in a short time period, it's over the long term. The benefits of a transportation infrastructure project, of a school, are realized over many decades, and long after this pandemic is over, the public will still be receiving the benefits of those funds, as opposed to probably several trillion that have been spent to date on many other things. So when you're talking about just keeping the lights on for many other forms of various needs.
And that's such an important message. How is AGC getting that message out? Tell me about all of AGC's advocacy efforts, and tell us how folks can get involved. How can anyone listening get involved and help support this?
Well, the first place you can go is advocacy.agc.org and go to the latest action alert where you can contact in under 60 seconds your two senators, your representative, and President Trump, and call for them to support a robust infrastructure package like the one we've been talking about, and that one. So I can tell you yesterday we sent the alert out to all AGC members among the 88 chapters throughout the country. And within several hours, we have had over 10,000 messages sent to those federally elected officials. So, there's a lot of momentum. We need to keep it going, keep the pressure on, because the reality is, while we have seen the pushback from the Senate, it's not over till it's over, and the continue forward momentum and pressure that can build will really make a difference. And we've seen that happen time and time again. When we look at back just in the last few months as what's happened to the PPP program and the loans there and the changes and the fixes that we've had after members have contacted their members of Congress, either through our action alerts or even just sent us accompanying letterhead letter and to share with their members of Congress directly to say, I want to be out here telling you that this is really impacting me. I'm going to put together and let you know how many employees I have and how my business is being directly impacted, not just through a pre-written message. That obviously takes a little bit longer, but we welcome those as well.
So that's an amazing response. And that's incredible that you're providing people with a real easy and direct way to share their voice and to communicate their message.
I would also have to add that we've got coming up next week the Contractors Voice directly being heard by Congress. I guess this is what you're gonna. I preempted you, Leah.
Yep, I was going to ask about this. Go ahead.
We have AGC's President Bob Lanham, president of Williams Brothers Construction out of Houston, Texas, testifying in person to the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee on infrastructure investment and the need for continued reforms, as well as far as things that are near and dear to your heart, like environmental streamlining and making infrastructure resilient. So we're going to be in the hot seat with Bob, but he's going to provide some real life experience that he's had over the last 3 months to really hit home what AGC members are feeling and seeing. So, there's no more effective advocate than a contractor talking directly to their members of Congress, whether it's in person, through emails, or the written word through just a regular letter. That's the most powerful messages that we can help send.
Absolutely. Great. Well, anything else you want to add, Jimmy?
Over the last several months, I've just been so impressed by how many members have engaged with us. I'm sure you feel the same way, Leah. I can tell you through our various action alerts, we've sent now, members have sent close to 150,000 messages to Congress and the president. That would take in a normal year, not just in a few months, that would take a decade based on what we're seeing. So the AGC membership has really stepped up and engaged, seeing that this is such an incredible time, and it really helps the staff continue to press day in and day out to fight for their interests, knowing that they have our backs too.
Great. Well, thank you, Jimmy. Thanks so much for your time and for sharing all of this information, your insight and your expertise in this area. And we invite everybody who's listening to get involved, get engaged, check out our website. Can you repeat that website again, Jimmy?
Absolutely. That's advocacy.agc.org.
Okay, awesome. And we're going to put that in the show notes along with the summary of the legislative package you just talked about. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. This has been the AGC ConstructorCast. Please subscribe to ConstructorCast from your podcast app or stream all available episodes right from your computer at agc.org/ConstructorCast.